Hey, thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you're here this week at the Business Emergency Room. We have a very exciting episode today. I'm here with Jennifer Cresswell, and we are going to talk about growing pains and scaling. Jennifer has over 20 years experience in leadership and operations and communication, and is the founder of Thoughtgro. She's a growth strategist and helps people with scaling and accelerating, with succession planning and sustained growth. So lots of topics we talk about and address in this podcast. Leadership today isn't just about scaling. It's about navigating constant uncertainty, market disruptions, and high-pressure decisions. If you're dealing with chaos, bottlenecks, and relentless pressure, welcome to the Business Emergency Room. I'm very glad you're here. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Maartje. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'm excited you're here because you work with companies that are slightly smaller than the businesses that I typically work with, but and that's mainly because that's your niche, right? So you can help those kind of clients a lot better. But when we talk, there is a lot of overlap and similarities in the challenges we face. And it's also, of course, not so black and white that some of these challenges only happen in smaller or bigger companies. So I wanted to start off by asking you specifically about the people dynamics part of things. We talk a lot about that here in this podcast too. Tell us more about examples in your space of what the challenges are around teams and people in organizations.
Absolutely. So, when you're a growing business, whether you're small or large, there's a lot of growing pains, so to speak, that the business goes through. When you're a small business, oftentimes your initial team is very scrappy, kind of does a lot of different things. People wear many hats, and that's great when you're getting up and running and reaching critical mass. What often happens once you've reached that critical mass and are on that path for growth is you start making changes based on where your business is headed. And a lot of businesses I work with are reaching that inflection point where the team that they started with was great, but the skill sets aren't necessarily matching up what the company needs going forward. And I think there are similarities in the businesses we work with, Maartje, just because that you may see that in a particular department of a larger organization that might be growing, where mine's kind of the whole business, which is starting to get larger.
Yeah, and it's painful, right? Because there is typically a lot of personal relations with these individuals, and they've helped you get that business to that place. But yeah, they may not have grown with the business, and that makes for difficult conversations and difficult decisions.
Absolutely. And so where I like to start a lot of my engagements is taking the people out of the conversation. So think of it in a way as looking at what your company needs from a role perspective. What are the roles and what are the skill sets that are needed for those roles to make them successful? And a lot of owners will say, but so-and-so does this and they can do this. And I say, wait, back it up. Think about it as an org chart with no names. So take the people out of it, take the people dynamics, and that can in some cases remove the emotion, which you have to take care of later. But if you can really set up what the company needs, what are the roles, then you can take a more unbiased view of what you're going to do next. Not to say that you're not going to use empathy and you're not going to take the people aspect of it into consideration. But if you know what the business needs, you can then start to really evaluate who you have and whether maybe you want to give them an opportunity to grow and learn a new skill set. Maybe they're going to specialize, or maybe you need to help them figure out what their next path is in a way.
Yeah, and stripping it back to what is the decision you're trying to make here, right? You're and focusing it back to what am I trying to achieve with my business? That doesn't really change when the going gets tough. That's the typical approach to try and get back to clarity and focus so that you can make those decisions, right?
That's very true. And I think in a way, your employees need you as a leader to do that. If you don't do that, then they start to become, well, why is this person still here? They're not doing as much as I'm doing. And there's that cause of, kind of angst, and people are kind of unsure about what is going on. As a leader, you have to make some of those tough decisions sometimes, but oftentimes it works out for the best for everyone.
Yeah, and if something doesn't serve you any longer, postponing the decision is not helpful, right? So Jennifer, you work with processes and process management, or talk about those a lot too. So if we take this from the people side to the process side, what are some of the challenges in scaling of businesses that you see people have, and what are some of the tactics that they can deploy or things to think about to improve things and get to that resilience and sustainability?
Sure. A lot of times, again, once you know what you need, then you start trying to put the right people in the right seats and getting your team set up. Then you want to add in process. And a lot of business owners, especially small business owners, see process as something negative. They see it as something that's going to stifle innovation, that, nobody's going to enjoy their jobs anymore because they're going to be these, little people that are just pressing a button and going home at the end of the day. But I look at process differently. I try to open their eyes that process can actually help innovation, right? If you create efficiency with what people are doing, leaders have room to then think about innovation and focus on the future. The people who are actually delivering their services to the clients, you're delivering best-in-class service, and they're not stressed out trying to recreate the wheel each time you're onboarding a new client or doing a different task. So I like to use process to create efficiency, but it's what you do with that time. That's what can really move your organization forward versus just trying to shove more work through the wheel, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that explanation. It doesn't serve you as an organization if your team needs to spend time every time agreeing with each other how they will do a certain piece of work, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes we forget about that part because we do so much ourselves. And once our business is still small, we do all of it ourselves. And so we don't need to agree that with anybody. But at some point, it becomes very inefficient because we don't have the same styles of working at all. No?
That's right. You're exactly right. And one of the things that small business owners really need to focus on as they scale is that you can't and you should not be doing everything yourself. At the same time, you also shouldn't be micromanaging your team. You hired these folks. And again, it goes back to putting the right people in place. You hired them to do a job. Let them do a job. Yes, you can ask them for help or say, this is the way we kind of want to do it. But if you spend all your time micromanaging, they're not going to grow and be happy. You're not going to innovate, and you're not going to move forward. It's almost in a way you need to be more of a coach than a manager if you're trying to really inspire and empower your team to do their best work.
Can we talk about that leadership transition a little bit more? From where you sit and from what you see, how do leaders in those positions where they're growing their business decide what are the first pieces that they're going to put elsewhere? How do you decide what you maybe relinquish some control over first?
I think it goes back to what do you do best and what do you enjoy? So sometimes those are not necessarily the same things. And so we have to have that conversation. But business owners should not be stuck in the weeds. If you really just want to be that producer and only do, say you're providing strategy work, and that's the only thing you want to do, then you need to think about bringing a leadership team on who's going to think about the business and work on the business while you focus on doing the client work. And then when you talk to an owner about that, they go, well, I don't want to report to someone. Right. So you have to start thinking about the business and how you're going to advance the business and bring in more people who can follow your processes, follow your methodology that you've set out. Again, it drives back to process, right? If you can productize and put together what you do, someone can do that work and you can focus on our next tranche of clients we're going to go after, maybe another business segment, whatever that might be. But again, really mapping out what does the company need to grow, figuring out who you have and what you want to do, that really helps to make the decisions because you know what you have and where you can start to fill in and make that next hire when you're able to do so.
Great advice. And that, it is important that you think really hard about what it is that you like, because that's the parts that will keep you impassioned about your business and that you're also excel at, right? So starting with that, what's not you, sounds smart. Sometimes though, sometimes though the thing is that where the perceived risk is with the business, I see that often with innovators, is that they see or perceive more risk with the things that they are less good at, because they know that they're less comfortable with that space. And so they perceive more risk, which leads to the need to stay more involved than maybe is needed. Because even if they then hire an excellent new partner or peer into the business to manage that piece, because that's also the section in which some of their biggest fears are, they stay very involved. So I think it's important to be aware that is potentially what's happening, right? Because that's your biggest unknown, or where you have your biggest doubts that things can be done or will go well. Doesn't mean that you can't find somebody to do that and build that trust.
Absolutely. And that's where that's where trust is such an important part, especially when you're looking from a leadership team or when you're going to start delegating some of the higher level tasks. And one of the things small business owners come to me and they're like, but I don't have the money to hire this person and this person and this person. And they're right, they don't. But you need to kind of reframe that. What do I need? Do I need a full-time COO? Maybe not. So there's this idea of someone who's a fractional or part-time, they're not going to be invested in your organization. And that's just not true. Now you have to find the right person that matches your personality. And there are plenty of clients that will come, we'll have a conversation, and they'll be like, oh, this is great. This is what I need. And we mutually decide that we're not the best people to work together because their working style and what I bring to the table are different, even though the skill sets match up. It's the personalities and working styles. So I always like to say, I'm happy to give you strategic advice. We can put together the strategy. If I'm the right person to help you with the implementation, let's do this. If I'm not, here's a list of other folks that I have worked with that I feel strongly about, and let's find that right match for you. Because it's in my best interest for your business to succeed. And I think that's what business owners need to understand when they hire fractional leadership. Those people want that business to succeed.
Yeah. And most people want to help. And in the consulting space, most of us, particularly the individual and smaller organizations, we're not interested in selling you more hours and more time at all cost, because it's more important that we deliver you what you really need and help you with what you really need, and that we then move on to the next client. Because if we stick around, we're probably working on stuff that isn't really our core business. So that doesn't generate the best value. It doesn't make us happy. We chose to pick our lanes because it makes us happy, and that's where our strengths are. And it doesn't deliver the best results, and hence it doesn't deliver the right next clients, right? And there's so often the thought, oh, I'll be paying for much more than I need. But somebody who wants to work part-time with you has a reason for wanting to work part-time. There's other reasons that have nothing to do with work.
You're so right about that. And a lot of fractional folks, part of the reason they went that route, and they want to help more businesses. They want to have more of an impact versus maybe just focusing on one company, or they like a specific size of company that maybe couldn't support them full time. They can still bring a lot of value. And I think one of the things I always enjoy is also that development of who's going to take over. Who's that next person who's going to take over when I, leave the organization? I really enjoy that. And that's one of the reasons I focus on that, back to what we were talking about, finding the right people. When you evaluate your people, part of that evaluation should be what they want to do in the future. What they say, somebody I'll give you a perfect example of an agency that I had worked with previously, and we were small. We were acquired. It was great, and then I was merging the two teams, right? And we realized that going after larger clients, that was going to require certain skills that some people didn't have. One person in particular was made, a manager. We'd sent him to managerial training, et cetera. He was really doing well. Ultimately, he decided to leave and found his dream job. Why is that a bad thing? It ended up being the best for him. Plus, the company showed the other employees that investment. We're going to invest in our people. We're going to help you develop. And if you leave and find something that you enjoy even more, great. That's a really good place for a company to be in. And you're going to attract people to work there because of the way that you treat your employees, whether they stay with you long term or not.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think if there is transparency and openness and trust, then the right people stay and the right people leave. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people leave for really good reasons. And sometimes people leave because they realize that you've grown apart and it's time to move, right? And it's much easier to do that on a basis of mutual respect and leave things on a positive note. Yeah. If that trust and respect and investment of people is there. For so sure. We're talking about growing pains today, right? And sometimes, or quite often, it's hard to acknowledge that we might need help and that things are really not going that well. So from the space where you sit, what are some of the symptoms that you see that growing pains are such that maybe it's time to slow down the growth a little bit and go a little slower, or to find help? So what are some of the symptoms or maybe some of the barriers you see that people need to be mindful of?
Some of the symptoms can often be owners or leadership teams feeling like they're doing everything and that their team, they don't trust their team, like a lack of trust, a lack of, I'm just not sure if that person's doing what they're supposed to be doing, so I should step in and do it. If leaders are finding that they're taking over or doing a lot more than they think they should be doing based on what's going on, that's a big symptom, big key indicator that maybe something's not working the way that it should. Another key indicator that is kind of on the employee side, you see a lot of employee stress, or they're not happy, or they're not stepping up, or you start to see an exodus of sorts with a number of people leaving. That can also be an indicator that things are just they're not moving smoothly. They're not working together as they should. Those are two big key things. And hopefully you don't get this symptom, but sometimes client dissatisfaction, or that's a key symptom. You hopefully are not going to have that because you'll catch it before that point in time. But that can be a real key indicator that your team is not working as efficiently, or that you don't have the right people in the right seats. Those would be the top three indicators that, your clients are coming in, money is coming in, jobs, but things are just not feeling good.
No. Yeah. And so to me, the symptoms in bigger, larger organizations are not that different, because definitely bottlenecks is one that I identify with big time, right? And bottlenecks in terms of decision making, too much decision making sitting in one place, or certain individuals or teams being truly overloaded with the amount of work that they're covering. And yeah, the people dynamic side, and even in the healthiest organizations where there is not where people generally get along, right? So there's not pre-existing interpersonal relationship issues. It can then start to get ugly suddenly, and people are very frustrated with each other, and suddenly there is much more talk behind each other's back. Mm-hmm. That comes from a frustration with the work, right? So there is something wrong with the balance of things, and yeah, I see those symptoms in organizations too, and it's intriguing how to me anyway, I feel like sometimes leaders are willing to put up with that being that bottleneck and being uploaded much longer than, or see that symptom much later than they see the people's symptom, which makes me, positive about humanity, because apparently a lot of these leaders see the pain in their teams before they address their own discomfort. Do you see that?
Yes, I do see that a lot. And I think on the small business side of things, owners, when you started your business, you did it all. Or you had a small team and you still were doing lots and lots and lots of stuff. So they fall back into that startup mode instead of looking at it and going, okay, what do I need to sustain my growth? And I think leaders in larger companies, that you see that too, they're used to taking on a lot. They feel that responsibility and that ownership of what their team is going to producing, just like what a small business owner would be producing. There's that ownership, that feeling of, I want to do this, and you need to change it to the, we should be doing this. We should be delivering this, and more of a group. It's almost that protector mentality of both the employees and the business and the work itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that brings us a little bit back to then where we started, right? Because I do think that in general, we should assume we have the right people in terms of that these people mean well and want to do the jobs they want to do. And so we should listen to them, right? We should listen to those symptoms. But yeah, then also acknowledge that sometimes that disgruntledness might also come forth from the fact that it maybe is no longer the right people in the right roles, right?
Yes.
Either way, that noise and that feedback that's coming needs addressing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, Jennifer, if the listener today has heard you talk and it's like, oh, I want to know more about Jennifer, or maybe even work with her or find more out about her, where do they go? What do they do?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Jennifer Cresswell. I'm always happy to connect and have a conversation. You can also go to my website, which is www.thoughtgro, THOUGHTGRO.com. And you can read a little bit more about what I do. But I'm always happy to have a conversation about what your business is going through, what I do, how I can help, or how I can introduce you to someone who can help. So please, I'd love to connect.
Thank you. I love to see the passion for what you do. It's so clear that you love your work. And we see a lot of the same things. I always love talking to you. And I think we could go on to these topics for much longer. And there's way more stories there too. So I'm really glad you were here today. I learned from you that there is quite a lot of parallels. I learned from you a slightly different way looking at processes, and also some tips and tricks, right, about respectfully treating that difficult assessment of, do I still have the right people, and how do I take the emotion out of that assessment to maybe do something about it? So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Before we go, do you have a final wisdom to impart on our audience? Something that helps you maybe in chaos, or that has helped others?
So when you're making difficult decisions when it comes to your company growing, I separate the people from the roles. It's I really believe that if you can figure out what your company needs from a roles and the skill sets that are needed to continue to grow, get that formalized, then you can take a more unbiased opinion and assessment of your team, really look at what they want to do, what they can do, what could be developed. And then my final piece is, don't shy away from the difficult conversations. It is possible to be objective and compassionate. And I think that's something that leaders owe to both themselves and their teams.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks for tuning in today. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here. And I hope to hear you back here next week. Thanks, you.
Maartje.
If decision-making in your business feels like a never-ending battle, I've got something for you. Join my free live webinar, Decision-Making Mechanics to Turn Chaos Around. It happens every third Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central. We'll tackle the real obstacles slowing you down. Register at thechaosgamesconsulting.com.